Hi, my name's Stephan Kesting. I did my first canoe trip more than 40 years ago and I've been paddling ever since. I'm an adventurer, I'm an author, I wrote Life and Death in the Subarctic, and today we're going to talk about spray decks for canoes. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So fundamentally, a spray deck is designed to keep water out of your boat. It's designed to keep the water in the lake or in the river and not inside your boat, where if it builds up, you're going to get progressively tippier. This is obviously super important in whitewater, where it allows you to handle much bigger rapids than you would ordinarily be able to handle. It's also important in wind, because when the lake builds up bigger waves and they start breaking and they start coming into your boat, well, with a good spray deck, they don't come into your boat. So it really gives you that safety margin. In addition, spray decks are also very, very helpful in cold weather. Early in the season, late in the season, a free cold snap, or if you're paddling way up north in the Arctic. That's because it gives you this layer of warmth, essentially. It keeps your lower body, your lower torso, and your legs warm. And that means you're much less likely to slip into hypothermia. An additional bonus with spray decks is it keeps your gear dry. Yes, your gear should probably be in waterproof bags, especially if you're on a difficult journey. But, you don't always close every bag, and sometimes it's a pain in the butt to have everything packed away perfectly. So a spray deck gives you a place to store your stuff under the deck where it's going to stay much drier throughout the day. Now, lots of people have done some very difficult expeditions without spray decks. That is true. And they do have a few drawbacks, and we're going to go into those. But overall, on difficult trips, on trips with large lakes, on trips where the weather could get cold, and especially where there's big whitewater, I really like them. Yes, you could climb Everest naked, but you're going to have a much higher chance of success of climbing Everest and coming back home alive if you wear conventional mountaineering gear. I think the same applies in most cases to spray decks. On a serious expedition, you probably want to have one. Now, nothing in life is free. There are definitely some drawbacks to using spray decks. For one, they cost money. They're about $500 or more for even a simple spray deck. And it's another thing to shepherd. It's another thing to carry. It's another thing to keep track of. If we take this spray deck here, which is for my pack boat, that's fairly hefty. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to bring, especially if you've got to take a float plane or if you've got to do a whole lot of portages. Putting it on and taking it off at every portage, if you're on a trip with a lot of portages, that can really add up with time. So they can slow you down. It can also make it a little bit more difficult to get at your gear. If your gear is stored under a spray deck, especially if it's tied in or lashed in, it's a little bit more difficult to get at something that you decide you want in the middle of the day for that spontaneous lunchtime nap in a tent, or getting at a windbreaker if your windbreaker was stored deep inside your bags. Some spray deck designs make this a little bit easier by having a center section that you can split open, or even a cargo hatch, almost like you would have on a sea kayak. And the absolute biggest drawback of spray decks is the entrapment hazard. Some spray deck designs have the potential of wrapping you up if you flip over, especially in whitewater, and now you're bouncing off the river, maybe unable to separate yourself from your boat, entangled in straps and trying to cut those or loosen those while you're underwater. Those are extremely bad designs, and I would urge you to go away from them. So there is an entanglement hazard that you have to be aware of, and you have to trade the benefits of some features against the drawbacks of others. And by the end of this video, you should have a better idea of what those might be. Almost all spray decks are made of nylons, either a waterproof nylon or a heavy coated nylon. And they need to have a cockpit because you're sitting on the seat of the boat, then the spray deck goes across the boat from gunnel to gunnel, and you need a way to come through that. So most commercially available spray decks have two holes, one for the bow paddler, one for the stern paddler. And unfortunately, all the designs that I've seen, they're not versatile. You can't use the same deck for paddling tandem as you can for paddling solo. Now, there are solo designs as well, usually tailored for specific boats. So if you're going to be paddling solo, you either need to build your own, or if you get lucky, you can buy one. Spray decks can be pretty particular as to what boats they fit on. Most manufacturers, or many manufacturers, offer a spray deck that comes with their specific design of boat. You can sometimes bring a deck from one boat and put it on another, but it doesn't always work perfectly. I have showed up at the beginning of a trip with what I thought would fit. I had a 16-foot spray deck, I had a 16-foot boat, but it was a different shaped boat. It was just a little bit longer, just a little bit wider than what I was used to. And as a result, the spray deck didn't quite go from bow to stern. So the last 5-6 inches of the boat had to be left exposed. So try them out at home, and usually, but not always, the decks are specific to a certain kind of boat. Now, over the years, I've owned 4 different spray decks. I've used a whole bunch more, especially when I was guiding or on trips with friends, on trips that I didn't organize. So I think I've got a pretty good sense of the types of designs that are available. But as always, if you know of a different design or a better feature, please let me know. I'm always looking for the better mousetrap, and I'm always looking for the better spray deck too. So fundamentally, a spray deck needs to be attached to your boat somehow. You can't just drape it over. The first big wave coming over the bow will just implode it. So it needs to be attached. Often, there are going to be holes drilled through the hull, or a strap or a piece of webbing riveted onto the hull, or attachment points attached to the actual hull where you're going to mount your spray deck to. A very common system is what I used here for the first spray deck I ever owned, and I built this following the model and the instructions in Cliff Jacobson's excellent book, Canoeing Northern Rivers. So this is the back part of the spray deck. Imagine, if you will, the canoe is here, and I've got this stretched across. There's a line, here's the gunnel, there's a line here, and I'm going to feed this strap and this tension buckle around. So now I've got it anchored here. Attaching your spray deck to your boat with a strap-based system affords for a little bit more flexibility, because if your load is particularly high and comes above the gunnels, you have some flexibility in where you set this buckle to bring it up or down. Also, if this was to tear off in the wilderness, it'd be relatively easy with a piece of webbing and a sewing awl to attach another strap on here, and it's relatively easy to repair in the field. I've done it lots of times. In contrast to this buckle-based system, we have the system that we use for my pack boat spray deck. It's a much heavier material here, almost like a vinyl. And as you see, there are just loops. These loops attach to the attachment points on the boat with a string or a cord that goes up and down. So it's very secure, but it does take more time to attach and to remove. And if I ever use this system again, and I hope I will, I'm probably going to modify it so that there's a cord on here with some kind of clip that I can adjust the clip on. And that way I can just clip, and it could probably be installed in 5 minutes, as opposed to 20 or 30 minutes of weaving this cord up and down. It's a great spray deck other than that, and we're going to go into some of the other features. Another method of attaching the spray deck to your boat is using snaps. Basically, these are riveted snaps, where the female snap is on the deck, and then the male snap is mounted in the hull of the boat. And you're going to mount this all around the edge of the boat. It's very fast to install, it's pretty secure, but the problem, at least with most designs, is when it's tight across your boat, there's not much play here. You can't really store equipment much higher than the gunnels. So on my big adventure in 2019 that turned into that book that I was talking about, I wasn't able to install this right away because all my gear and 50 days worth of food really went beyond the confines of the gunnel, and no matter how hard I tried, I could not snap it on. So I had to eat my way into my supplies for about 25 days until I could even fit the spray deck on, at least in the back portion of the boat. Also, you can see that this design, which is built for a solo boat, and this design, which I built myself for a 16-foot prospector, which could be paddled alone or solo, I built it with just one cockpit, because I was mostly going to paddle that boat solo, at least in the big adventure that I was getting ready for. That was a 2,800 kilometer trek from the Rocky Mountains, down the Athabasca River, across Lake Athabasca, up the Fond du Lac River, across Wollaston Lake, down the Cochrane River, overland to the Seal River, down the Seal River to Hudson Bay, and along the Hudson Bay coast to Churchill. Now, how the cockpit encloses your body is a super important consideration. The design for this one, which I got from Cliff Jacobson's book, is very clever. You can see it has two pieces of Velcro here, and then a snap. So it rides fairly high, especially when you've got a life jacket on. But if I go over, or I suddenly need to get out, one pull, and I can step out of the boat. That's incredibly important. Similar design with the pack boat spray deck. I'm in the boat here. This is the stern section. Male Velcro, female Velcro, a snap here. And then if I need to get out, I pull and I pop right out. So I really like that double Velcro system. Another system that's very common is the one that's used here in the Black Feather spray deck. Now, Black Feather is a guiding company, and they take a lot of beginners, some of whom may never have paddled before, so I understand why they would want something simple and relatively bomb-proof. And in their system, their cockpit is designed with an open hole. There is no way to seal this around yourself, meaning that if the boat turns over, you just pop out. But what's to stop a wave from coming in and just pouring through that opening and flooding your boat? Well, they've got a fairly clever system here where you take a plastic dowel and you feed it through a sleeve on the inside of the boat. What this does is it creates like a little windshield for you, like a little windshield on a sidecar. It doesn't come up and cover you, but it does break the wind. Well, this stops some of the water from splashing in to your boat. So there we go. Imagine, if you will, this is mounted across the boat, but the plastic rod here holds it up. So big wave coming, most of it will bounce off, a little bit will come in, but the plus side is you don't have to worry about entanglement really at all. Once again, they use a strap-based system. Now, on some of my expeditions, I've used the Western Canoeing C1 Canoe Kayak Hybrid. It's a beautiful boat. And the spray deck is very well designed with one major problem. And it's my fault for not trying it out before I went into the field. Because when I finally was able to put it on, I realized that this was tightened with an elastic cord system and then a couple of suspenders. The trouble is, once you've got a life jacket on, and this gets over the ridge of the life jacket, and you've got knives on your life jacket and whistles on your life jacket, you might not be able to get this strap off in the heat of the moment, especially if you have it cinched up. So now you go over and you're bouncing off the rocks at the bottom of the river with ice cold hands, and you're trying to find these buckles, and you have to release them. So I never ended up using the suspenders. I would keep it open, and a wave coming over the front of the boat would wash over, and most of it would go off to the side, but then there'd always be a big slug of water that would come down, pour down the open cockpit and into the boat. So I'm currently in the process of using a sewing awl to close up the Velcro sides on it. And then when I'm done that, I'm going to install that kind of double Velcro and snap system. I'm going to basically retrofit it. This is easy to do in the city where I've got access to Velcro, where I've got access to snaps, where I've got access to like a rivet gun. Much harder to do in the field, which is why I didn't do it. So you might have noticed there's a bit of a recurring theme here. Twice I've said, I didn't know this about the spray deck till I ended up out in the field. And it was the same spray deck and the same boat and the same trip. Now, in my defense, I was incredibly busy getting ready for that trip, and I received the deck a couple of days before I was about to head out, and I just threw the deck in my packing gear and shipped it off and then retrieved it at the other end. It's not much of an excuse, because I should have found the time to make sure that the deck fits on the boat, to make sure it's the right length for the boat, to make sure that I like the attachment system, to make sure that it can handle the amount of gear that I have. So I can't encourage you strongly enough that if you're going to use a spray deck on a big expedition, try it out on a gentle lake first. Try it out, because here is where you're going to find out, oh, this doesn't attach to this. This part doesn't attach to that part. I'm missing this critical reinforcement hoop. Try it out before you go, and that applies to any of your gear. One other really important feature for spray decks is whether or not you can attach things to the top of it. Because if I'm paddling along, I like to have my map and my compass on my front deck. I like to have my spare paddles within reach. I need to know where I'm going, and if I lose a paddle or break a paddle or it gets ripped out of my hand in whitewater, I need to be able to get another paddle instantly. So most spray decks now will have some kind of pocket where you can fit the blade of a paddle, and then they'll have some kind of strapping system here where you can attach the handle of a paddle. Now, again, try it out first. I have found out firsthand that some of these spray decks that I have, a decent length paddle will fit on the deck, but I'm going to have the handle of the paddle sticking into my belly the whole entire time. And it's something that I should either modify, perhaps by taking a shorter backup paddle or by moving the pocket of the paddle. So having places to attach maps, say, having a place to store your paddles, having a way to access your gear. You know, for this boat, for example, I have attachment points. I've got to have a big map case, or I have a big map case that gets tied onto here with short cords. And I also usually tie my camera onto my boat because I don't want to lose it with wet, cold fingers and have it fall into the lake and be gone. Not after doing all that paddling. I want some photos, I want some videos to remind me of that trip. So to summarize, spray decks add a significant level of safety to trips that involve whitewater, to trips that involve big lakes, to trips that involve cold weather. It makes life better and safer in all those conditions usually. There are downsides to them. They are bulky. You will sometimes go slower. They take time to put on and to take off. And there can be entanglement hazards especially if the cockpit system that you sit in isn't well designed. When you get one, or before you get one, you have to consider how is it going to attach onto the boat. Are you okay with mounting snaps on your boat with a rivet gun? Are you okay with threading a rope through the hull? Are you okay with gluing on attachment points? Because that's going to happen. It takes a lot of courage to sit there with a drill in your brand new multi-$1,000 boat and to put a hole in it. Some other things to consider are how easy is it to get at your gear in the middle of the day? How easy is it to get at your spare paddles, which are hopefully attached to the top of the deck with some kind of quick release system? How easy is it to mount a map and perhaps a compass on the deck of the boat, the stuff you really need to navigate? Other nice to have features include ties. Sometimes if you've got one of those tunnel-based systems, if you can tie it up on a hot day, or perhaps you can just undo the section around you and fold it up so that you get some air movement through there on a hot day, that's really nice. It's a nice to have, not a need to have. Once again, if I've missed your favorite spray deck, if there's some massively beneficial feature that you've thought of or that you have on one of them, let me know. I'm always willing to learn. I'm always willing to try out a new spray deck on my next trip.